Is this love at first sight or karma? Hey everybody, this is Pastor Justin Walker with The Whole Truth. We're going through the entire Bible from beginning to end, from Genesis to Revelation, and I hope you didn't turn it off because I said karma. I don't believe in karma, and I don't believe that you should either, but I do believe there's a universal truth that's taught throughout the Bible, that we see throughout the Bible, and I want to show you that today. Look at Genesis chapter 29, and then after you find Genesis 29, keep your thumb there and turn over to Galatians. So that's in the New Testament after 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, and then Galatians. And then I want you to do this. Go 6, 7, 8. Chapter 6, verses 7 and 8. Galatians 6, 7, 8. You can do that. And while you find it, if you need more time, just hit pause on the video. And while you're doing that, you can also hit subscribe. And look at Galatians chapter 6, and then in 7 and 8. And as you find that, I want to remind you that Jacob is who we're talking about. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. That's the story in Genesis. I'm giving you a universal truth out of Galatians. I hope I haven't confused that. So Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob deceived. He sold he sold his stew at the price of his brother's birthright. He took his brother's birthright. He said, "I'll give you some of my stew, but I want your birthright." His brother said, "Who cares?" But he should have cared. And so Jacob took his birthright, sold it for a cheap price, or bought it for a cheap price, I should say. And then that same Jacob later went as far when Isaac was trying to bless Esau, his brother. Jacob, the brother of Esau, snuck in, put fur on his hands, put on his brother's clothes, his mom made food that his dad would have thought was his brother's, and he took it into his dad, and he tricked his dad, who was pretty much blind and up in his hundreds, well over 100 years old, and he tricked his dad into blessing him. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Isaac ends up blessing Jacob instead of Esau because Jacob tricked him. Now, listen, God's will was going to be done, and that's in the last video, but I want you to see this universal truth. Galatians 6, 7, 8. Read this. "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to the flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life." Now, before you come at me and give me a dissertation and tell me that I'm misinterpreting Galatians, I'm not misinterpreting Galatians. I understand that Galatians is speaking about the law and faith, about Jewish law or faith in Christ as a means of salvation. I understand that that's what Galatians is talking about. But I'm also telling you that there's a universal truth taught right there in Galatians. God will not be mocked. What a man sows, this he will reap. This we see all through the Bible. We see, look at Abraham and Isaac. Abraham lied about his wife and said his wife was his sister. His son did the same thing. Look at David and Bathsheba. Remember David and Bathsheba. David has an affair with Bathsheba. Does the child live? No, the child died. I'll give you another one. Remember Pharaoh. Pharaoh with Moses. In the Bible, Pharaoh kills all of the Hebrew babies. Well, what happens later? God sends through at Passover, after the 9 plagues, on the 10th plague, God sends through Egypt the angel of death, and the firstborn males die. What I'm telling you is there's a universal truth, and it's not karma. It's God. It's God who is faithful and God who is just, and God has told us that what a man sows, this he will also reap. Well, look now at the story, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had tricked his dad. Now he has to run. He's running from Esau. He's had a vision. The Lord has not changed his promise towards Jacob, but it doesn't mean that Jacob totally gets out of what he's done. There are still consequences for his actions. And look, Jacob went on his journey, and he came to the land of the people of the east, and he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of the well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. So hope you understand, Jacob comes to a well, and there's 3 flocks of sheep there. This is where they water the sheep from. Verse 4, Jacob said to them, "My brethren, where are you from? They said, we are from Haran. Then he said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And so he said to them, is he well? And they said, he is well. And look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. Then he said, look, it is still high day. It is not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go feed them. But they said, we cannot until the flocks are gathered together and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. Now, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. And so she ran and told her father. Now, I hope you kept up with the story there as I was reading it. There's this well, there's a stone on the well, there's 3 flocks there. He asked about Laban. They said, we know Laban, and that's Laban's daughter right there. Laban is a relative of Abraham. Now, don't get all caught up in the idea that, okay, this makes them cousins. In that day, in that custom of that day, they wanted to keep it in the family, and they were trying to marry in the family. Before you go getting all bent out of shape about that, pay attention to what's really happening. God is just arranging everything for Jacob. Jacob sees Rachel coming. He was going to Laban. He was going to his mother's brother's house. That's where he was going to go. But before he even gets there, he already runs into Rachel. And he obviously falls in love with her. He gets so excited. He tries to send the other flocks away. He tells them to go away. And he said, look, it's not time to water the cattle yet. Go on back out into the field. Tries to get them to go away, I guess so that he can talk with Rachel by himself. I don't really know why he tried to get them to go away, but that's what he tried to do. Well, they didn't really go away. They said, we can't water the flocks. We're waiting for the stone to be rolled away. This is how we do it here. We all gather together. We roll the stone away. We water the flocks. Well, when Rachel starts to walk up, she realizes she's a shepherdess and she's got her own flock. And so Jacob runs over, rolls the stone away. You can imagine he's probably like most guys. He's showing off a little bit. He rolls the stone away and he starts watering her flock for her. Then he kisses her. I mean, this guy he's in it. He's excited. He kisses her and then he weeps. Again, not our custom. We're here in the West. This is not the way we do things. I promise you, if I was trying to show off for a girl, I'm not going to kiss her and then start crying. That seems weird to me. But in that time, in that day, that was not necessarily seen as weird. You can see that Rachel's excited enough about it that when Jacob says, I am Rebekah's son, Rachel runs back to tell her dad, Laban. This is where the story gets interesting, and I come back to what we're talking about, that what you sow, you also reap. Read this with me. I know it's a lot to read today, but stick with me. I won't be too long. Start there in verse 13. Then it came to pass when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him. That means he kissed him on the cheek, just like they do in some other countries today. He kissed him on the cheek, and he brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Okay, if you don't understand what's happening, Jacob's there for a month. Laban says, what should I pay you for your service, for working here with me? And Jacob says, I want your daughter, Rachel. That's what I want. Here's what he says in verse 18. Jacob loved Rachel, and so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your daughter. Okay, so Jacob says, I will serve you for 7 years. That's what I'll work for 7 years, but I want Rachel. I want to marry Rachel. Now, if you didn't understand what we meant by Leah was delicate in the eyes, it means that she wasn't pretty. Okay, Rachel was pretty, Leah wasn't pretty, according to this text. That's what's happened. Well, Jacob's got his eyes on Rachel. He wants Rachel. Well, Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in to her." And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went in to her. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. And so it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me?" And Laban said, It must not be so in our country to give a younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. And so he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban still another 7 years. Whew. Are you understanding what just happened? Jacob says he wants Rachel. That's what he wants. He'll serve Laban for 7 years. He doesn't want any money. He doesn't want any flock. He doesn't want any cattle. He just wants his daughter Rachel to marry. Laban agrees. 7 years of service and you can have my daughter Rachel. 7 years goes by. It seems like a couple of days. And Laban dresses up. He veils her face of the older daughter Leah. And Jacob marries Leah. And then when he calls Laban out for it, Laban says, "Oh, it's a custom in our country that that the older has to get married before the younger." Why didn't Laban tell him that 7 years ago? Why did Laban veil her face? Because Laban was tricking Jacob. Laban tricked Jacob into taking both Leah and Rachel. Now, you might say, well, does this mean that God condones polygamy? No. It goes to show that God is telling a true account of what actually happened with this man. And this is only going to be a complication. What happens here, what happened in this story, only becomes a further complication for Jacob. Jacob he calls out Laban, and Laban says, "Well, I'll tell you what, serve another 7 years. Fulfill her week, fulfill Leah's week, and then serve another 7 years, and I will give you Rachel as well." And so Jacob has to serve another 7 years. 14 years serving Laban. He was tricked into that service. So why would Laban have veiled up Leah? Why would Laban have done this? Why would Laban have wanted to trick Jacob? He did it to keep Jacob there working and serving him. That's what he was doing. He tricked him so that he would have to work there the whole time. 14 years later, he is still working for Laban because of what Laban had done. And so what I'm telling you today is this. There's a universal truth in the Bible that what you sow, you also reap. Jacob, at some point, do you have to wonder, did he think to himself of when he put the fur on the back of his hands and went to his dad Isaac? I'm willing to say he probably did. Remember when Jacob put on his brother Esau's clothes and went in to his dad and pretended to be his brother so that he could get the blessing? And you see now he's reaping something very similar. And he doesn't have any leg to stand on and say, "You've treated me so unfairly," because truthfully, Laban did to Jacob exactly what Jacob had done to Isaac. Now, I am not saying that we should try to exact vengeance on somebody. What I'm saying is there's a universal truth in the Bible that what you sow is also what you reap. Now, here's the glorious news that I want to share with you. Jesus offers to forgive you. This is not like God is going to, in heaven, that somehow God is going to be giving out punishments to us while we're in heaven. There is no like purgatory that you have to go pay for sins before you go to be with the Lord for eternity. Why? Because Jesus has offered to forgive you. He took the price of your sin on the cross. So are there earthly consequences for our actions? Yes, there are. But Jesus offers to forgive you so that you can be with him in eternity. And that's where we put our rest and our hope. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow with more of Genesis chapter 29. See you then.